And good morning, everybody. We're live. Congratulations. You've made it through the week. Another amazing week of food safety, food quality, producing and putting on the shelves all those products out there that we all know and love, and most importantly, trust. And people behind the scenes that make that happen, like you, often do it unappreciated. But Paul and I are here today to say thank you. We really appreciate all that you do to make our food safe. If you're new, pull up a chair. This is the Food Safety Chat Live, and my name is Brian Armentrout with the Food Leadership Group. And every Friday at this time, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, we go live on YouTube and LinkedIn, and we have a conversation with you around all things food safety. And this is meant to be a conversation and share information. And one of the central tenets of the show is if you learn just a little bit, just add to your knowledge base of food safety and making things a little bit safer, we all benefit from that. So if you're familiar with the chat, you recognize Paul. Paul Valder is the CEO of Culture Advisory Group and sponsor here on the show. How you doing, Paul?
Awesome. Thanks. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Brian. Thank you for the opportunity. This is great.
You bet. And so one of the things, Paul, that we do here, as you know very well on the chat, is we put in where we're at in the world. And I'm in Loveland, Colorado, where it is presently snowing pretty hard, which is great because we have had a very, very dry winter in Colorado. Where are you at?
Well, I'm in, as they usually call it, beautiful wine country in Niagara-on-the-Lake in Ontario. And it's raining out as we speak, but the snow's gone, and we're supposed to get, I think, 60 degrees tomorrow, 65 degrees.
Nice.
Looking better now.
Good. Well, hopefully spring is on the way for all of us. So let's see who we got. So Valentina in Montreal, welcome. Good old Joe. Joe's down in South Carolina. Good to see you here. Marin, Cheryl, Sean, Michelle. So a lot of our regulars are here who have joined us. Thank you for investing in this time and joining us. Trish, welcome. Aston, Pennsylvania. I'm not quite sure where that's at. I used to live in, I lived in Lancaster for a number of years out there running quality for a company. Beautiful area down there. Lived down there with the Amish. So you would see the buggies and stuff. And Paul, have you ever had Scrapple? Have you heard of that stuff?
Say I haven't. We have a large Amish community just north of us here. So never tried that.
Yeah, it's pretty much you take all the leftover stuff and you kind of make like a spam type thing and cook it up. So, yummy. So,
Okay.
So Trish is outside of Philly. Okay, nice, very nice. So, one of the things that we do here in the chat, everybody, is join us for a drink of your favorite beverage. Cheers.
Coffeeed out this morning already.
Very nice. Very good coffee. So we're doing something a little bit different here today, guys. Normally, I'm the one that gets to tell the dad joke, but I've given Paul the honor this week of actually telling the dad joke. So are you ready, sir?
Well, the pressure's on. But,
okay, I'm ready to receive. Okay, what you got?
What did the two oceans say to each other?
What did the two oceans say to each other? I don't know. What did they say?
Nothing. They just waved.
Very nice. That deserves an applause. Excellent. That was perfect. Hey, Brett's joining us up in Canada. Oh, he's got a leaf on there too. Clever. I like that. That's funny. So, Paul, one of the things I like to do on the chat here too is you're very well known in the food industry in Canada and the U.S. What have you been up to lately?
Right. Well, thanks, Brian, and everyone. I'm typically one that likes to look into the future and see what the next, wave, no pun intended, looks like for the industry, and look at the niche opportunities that where we can make a difference and affect change. And I think we are at a crossroads today, and based on many different factors around the world. And I think we're seeing that a lot of people are actually tweaking to the need for change, I guess, in our industry. So that's kind of I've been focused on on supply chain primarily, and food adulteration, the adulteration in the supply chain, the need for more, I guess, more self-governance, and also looking at how we can affect change, not just at the quality and food safety management level, but more at a senior corporate level, because I think, as we've all talked about over the years, change has to come from the top down.
Right.
And there's, we talk to a lot of people constantly in the industry at a QA level, the food safety level, technical levels, and so on. And we feel the pain. We feel the pain that some of these people undergo every single day, and kind of caught, to be honest with you, Brian. Kind of caught, and it's unfortunate.
Well, that's a good point, Paul, because part of this is, and we hear this a lot in food safety, is, recalls aren't going down, things aren't improving. Let's just keep doing what we're doing and just do it harder, right? And nothing really changes. And I think there's a lot of people out there asking these questions and saying, okay, fine, we've mastered what we're doing now. What can we do better? And I think that's kind of this next evolution, and something we talk about here on the chat quite a bit. And that's kind of the purpose of our talk here for today, is looking at one of those areas. And food fraud is a giant area. And I think a lot, especially from the perspective of a quality manager in a plant. Number one, as we talk about here on the chat, corporate influences your ability to manage food safety a lot more than we want to recognize. If procurement is out there buying from unknown sources, that's a giant risk. And here you are, you're the quality manager sitting in the plant, Paul, and you're trying to figure out, and this is really the conundrum, there's risks, okay, fine, I'm buying non-fat dry milk. I know there's risks for salmonella. I can test for that, I can look for that. But with non-fat dry milk, we found out very quickly with the melamine issue from China, it's the things you don't know about that you have to worry about. And that really scares quality managers, because the things that you don't know about, and I know this for myself, those are the things that really keep you up at night, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, we've certainly learned a lot, I have anyway, over the last couple of few years about this subject, and seeing what both retailers and manufacturers are doing. And I think, when you look at, the various voluntary standards out there, even some of the now new FSMA standards and Safe Food for Canadians Act and so forth, there's a section in there that calls for food defense. And I think, I'm really not convinced that is being taken seriously. However, when the largest retailer in the world, creates a new position or a new role for food fraud or for a food authenticity role, you have to ask yourself, what am I doing now? I need to take a deeper dive into this. I need to really understand it. And I think it starts with your own products and understanding your own products. And you'd be surprised in how many, especially in the private label or the own brand, retail own brand space, how many products do not have a detailed spec.
Yeah, exactly.
And you got to start somewhere.
Right. Well, and yeah, so as Jose Sabal taught me very well, is start at the beginning, which is definitions. So part of that then, Paul, is I think a lot of times people get confused between these different subjects. So biosecurity and these stuff. So food fraud is a very specific thing. So how would you, just in generic terms, how would you describe food fraud? What is it?
So I would prefer to use, food fraud obviously is the intentional adulteration or change of materials that you're purchasing and ingredients. So it's the intentional Obviously, food safety is the unintentional, of course, and food defense is another word that gets kind of mixed up in that process. And food defense is clearly, we think of it being tagged to terrorism or something of that nature. But at the end of the day, it's all the same. In my mind, it's all the intentional adulteration of your products coming to you.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. And for me, it's like for those two categories. So food defense is someone is actively trying to hurt you. They're trying to poison the food. They're trying to do terrorism. They're doing it solely to damage. Food fraud is somebody's trying to make a quick buck. They're trying to sell you something that isn't really what it is. They're misrepresenting something. The classic example, to your point, Paul, getting onto the food safety side of things, was there was an issue a number of years ago with ground cumin in India. And somebody had the brilliant idea, and this is always the risk with ground spices, is you really don't know what they've ground up in that spice. So always buy whole spices if you can. And they ground up the cumin, and somebody had this brilliant idea to, hey, let's put some filler in there. Here's a bunch of peanut shells that are just kind of laying around. Let's get a bunch of those and grind them up in there with it. Didn't even think about the allergenic potential for that. And a lot of people got sick, and then they started looking at it and they figured out what the hell these people did. And again, it wasn't intentional. Nobody thinks it was that. It was just that they were trying to cheat.
I think what's important for the QA folks and food safety folks to understand and being able to communicate this up the ladder is that, yes, the additional due diligence that's required doesn't just sit with QA or food safety, number one. However, doing additional testing, the right testing, looking at ways to mitigate the risk of a food issue, a food fraud issue, has and will have a lot of other ancillary benefits for the business. Obviously, quality is one, obviously. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they said they work for a company where, the CEO of the company said, we want a superior quality product. It has to be a superior quality product. And they're telling this to the QA people. And so what does that mean? They didn't define what that meant. Does it mean that the product is consistent? So you sell a McDonald's hamburger in Toronto or in LA, and that same hamburger can be purchased consistently in Hong Kong? Is that what that superior quality means? Or is it tied to other things? So again, to ask the quality department to be responsible for something like that, that is absolutely absurd. So, I think that cost, safety and reputation, increased quality, all these benefits can come out of managing or mitigating your the potential of a food fraud issue.
Right. Well, and for me, it always comes back to your point, Paul. It's the poor quality manager sitting in the plant going, ugh, right? So he's looking through his standard. He's got to be certified to SQF or whatever. And within there's a section on food fraud saying you need to protect the product and you shall do this and you shall do that. And then they sit back and they're like, oh, okay, I get it. So they start looking at their food safety plan or their HACCP plan, and they say, all right, for this particular ingredient, here's the chemical, physical, and microbiological properties that I should be concerned about. Okay, thank you, FDA, for Appendix 1 and kind of laying that stuff out for me. Appreciate the help. But again, there's all kinds of things out there. So if I'm buying, let's say, a grain product, Paul, and I'm all right, I'm buying wheat that goes in my product. I get the allergen piece of it and cross-contamination and all that stuff, got it. But then I started thinking about stuff, and I'm like, okay, well, what if there's pesticide residue in there? Okay, what if there's a mycotoxin in there? And I start coming up with this giant list of stuff. And I do my research on the internet, and I go out and I come back and I've got all these chemicals that we need to be worried about and heavy metals and God knows what. And now I go to the plant manager. I'm like, okay, I put together my food fraud program to make sure that all these bad things aren't in there. And the plant manager is like, okay, fine. And you start going through this with the plant manager. And the next question, of course, is going to be, oh my goodness, how much is it going to cost us to test for all this stuff? And the quality manager is like, yeah, it's probably going to cost about $5,000 every time we want to bring in a new lot, right? And that stuff gets boom, right? That gets slammed down right away because that's just one ingredient, and the plant would go bankrupt trying to figure that out. I think what happens a lot of times, Paul, is it's like, all right, okay, I understand what FDA is going to ask me for. I've got all these other things that I'm worried about. I don't have the weight. I don't have any ability to necessarily test for them, so I'm just gonna do this. I'm gonna pretend I don't see those things and ignore them and hope that nothing happens because I don't have the ability to look for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think that what people need to understand is that technology is advancing in leaps and bounds, as we know, and there are, there's nothing different about what you're talking about than uncovering what risk is. Okay, so you need, you don't know what you don't know. So if you're typically looking for the same thing all the time, that's great if it's, the harmful regulatory compliance pieces you need. But when you look at identity as an example, looking at an identity test, an identity test will tell you yes or no, it's in there. But it won't tell you what else is in there unless you already know what you're looking for. And to your point, Ryan, if you know what you're looking for and you've got all these different things you want to look for, the cost of those tests, we'll call them targeted tests, add up immensely and become unaffordable and unrealistic. So you need to look at other ways of assessing or analyzing your ingredients beyond just yes or no, it's there. Okay.
Yeah, I want to expand on that really quickly to make sure people caught that. Because let's say, for example, going back to your example where the CEO says, we want a superior product, whatever that means. And R&D goes out and does some formulation, and supply chain goes out and buys pure Madagascar vanilla, the highest grade, organic, whiz bang, super fantastic, extremely expensive vanilla. Okay, fine. Is it pure? It's there, but is it just like a little drip that they stuck in there to call it that? And then it's all kinds of other fake vanillins or other things in there that aren't real. So it could be 1% Madagascar vanilla and then a bunch of other crap, right? Is that what you were saying?
Well, absolutely. So you not only need to identify or qualify it, but you need to quantify it as well. Okay. And then the other thing that you benefit from looking at a broader spectrum approach to this is, or a non-targeted approach. You benefit from understanding everything that's in the product. Okay. Mm-hmm. So we talk about fingerprinting, we talk about profiling the product. Okay. So if you have a good spec, you absolutely know what should be in that product, the amounts and so forth, and that there shouldn't be anything else in there. So now if you go to a broader spec approach, you will see that the results of that analytics will tell you that yes, your vanilla is in there. It's 98%. There's some other things in there. You may or may not know what those are. Okay.
Right.
All right. And if there's a big enough spike in there, you're going to want to know what that is. And there are technologies that are very, very affordable today to be able to analyze that for you. And so my recommendation always is get confidence in your product to start with. Create the quality of the product you want. Have a broad spectrum analysis done on, and NMR technology works very well for that. Look at that complete profile of that product. Once you're confident that product, and you may need to do a little R&D on it, at the time, but once you're confident that you have that product where you want it from a quality perspective, you fingerprint it, basically. By doing that, you in essence fingerprint your product. Now, if that fingerprint is now stored in a library, a scientific library somewhere, then you can then look at the consistency of that supply and the consistency of that end product.
Well, and
compare.
yeah, I mean, and really, so with that, you've made an important point there as well, Paul, is that your specification is very important. I talk with a lot of companies, you do too, and you say, okay, let's really look at your suppliers, your supply chain, which is extremely important in companies and something in the risk assessment I look at really closely. You do too. And what is your specification? And most companies will say, well, I rely on the specification that came from my supplier. My supplier gave me the specification. Really? Well, if you're the supplier, you're going to create a specification that's really broad. You're going to create a specification for that product that's as wide as you can get away with, because you want to sell it to everybody. That specification for, let's say, standard plate count needs to be extremely, you drive a truck through that standard. And if you're, for example, producing, and this is why this is important too, who are your consumers? Who's your end target for your product? That's going to impact how tight your spec needs to be. We're producing a product for babies. Oh, crap. I got to have a really, really well understood specification. And a lot of times when you go into companies, Paul, you have 500, 1,000, 2,000. When I was at White Wave with Dean Foods, we had 6,000 ingredients under different SKUs that we were purchasing. It's overwhelming. You can't create specs for all of those type of things. You have to figure out where to prioritize. But you can't have this conversation with your supplier to identify what you're saying, which is that fingerprint. You can't figure that out until you can explain to them what you want. Because if you don't, it's just like go and buy a car. If you just show up at a car lot and you're like, hey, give me a car. Sure. We got cars. We got all kinds of cars.
Yeah.
And if you just take the first car, good luck with that.
No, exactly. And I think, to your point, I mean, it goes back to, the old adage. I mean, why are suppliers being asked to conform to GFSI? It's no different than asking your supplier to provide you with the right kind of test, result. And I mean, but to your point, you need to understand what you're asking for, and be able to verify that as part and validate it as part of your overall, process. So
yeah. So Ali here makes a good point. Let me pull this up here. Is that there's organizations out there that can help you with this. So there's the Flavor and Extract Manufacturers Association. A little down in the weeds, but I think it's a really good example because flavors for your products are extremely complex. And you'll buy these flavor packets for your different products. And a lot of times these flavor houses don't even want to tell you what's in it because that's their bread and butter. That's their secret. And that gets very problematic when you're talking about food safety, because you need to make sure that those things in there are safe. So you need to, and this is something we emphasize here on the chat time and time again, Paul, is your risk assessment is great, but you also need to overlay that with your target audience. And you need to prioritize. And a lot of times, and this is a fatal flaw I think we see in what we do all the time, is when we create our hazard analysis, is we look at an ingredient, we do the chemical, physical, and microbiological threats generically. And we say, for this category, this is the overall risk. I think it's for this ingredient, I think it's severity is medium and risk is medium. Okay, fine. And you're just kind of spitballing it, you're guessing. And what they forget is the supplier introduces extreme risk into this. You have to know who you're dealing with, don't you?
Yeah, and quite honestly, again, we fall into the trap as the QA department or the food safety department that we can develop the product, we can have a quality product, we can have a spec. You have to know what your deviation, limits are as well. Based on purchasing, you're going to have some deviations. But again, it just goes back to that purchasing and sourcing issue. And and I heard on one of your previous chats, Brian, that you talked about the fact that, if your purchasing person is got a financial incentive to save money, that's a huge risk to your quality.
Yeah.
So again, you can do all you can do at that certain point, but if you're going up the ladder, you need to. This is where the challenge comes. I think is really number one, making sure that you're getting the interpretation of what quality means from your senior team. What does quality really mean to them? Do they measure quality by customer complaints? How do we establish quality first of all? And then if you're building your products and to that level or that specification, that definition, then how do you maintain that throughout the organization, with sourcing and R&D and so on? So I think as we all talk about, this is a bigger challenge when it comes to food fraud than just putting it on the shoulders of the quality department. And I think food safety is food safety, but we're talking more about risk management here and mitigating your food fraud. Now, the testing, and Alex mentioned some of the resources there, and I have to sort of put a plug in. I'm on the board of Purity IQ, and that's an organization that does nothing but authenticating ingredients and final product using really cool qPCR and NMR technology. So that's the plug. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say, but that's all they do. So if you're using your regular commercial labs right now for all the things you talked about, Brian, your pesticides, your regulatory compliance issues, and you want to take a deeper dive into your product, that's a company and organization that does just that. So I think it's timely, and I think it's an option for people. And I think that when it comes to your market claims and what you're doing out there, you've got to be really careful these days.
Yep. So Sean makes a good point here, which is kind of emphasize what we're saying is quality and procurement, purchasing group, they need to be married at the hip. And the procurement group needs to understand some basics around food safety, because if that company they're considering purchasing from or moving forward with doesn't even understand the basics of food safety, that's not a good fit. I was working, quick story on this. I was working in a past company and they were getting ready to launch a new product. And so like most product launches, Paul, it's like, we gotta get this to market right away. And so it's okay, fine. And it was a brand new novel type product we didn't know a whole lot about. And there was a key ingredient for this product. And I'm like, well, we need to evaluate this supplier. It's like, we gotta hurry. So we requested all the documents from the supplier, and they were in the Philippines. And I got the documents and I got their HACCP plan, and they had all these documents, but I had questions. And curiosity can uncover a lot of different things. And I'm like, okay, well, they have a HACCP plan. And if you do like a lot of companies, you just get the documents and you file it away, big mistake. I called the CEO on the phone. We had a conversation, and Paul, maybe about 4 sentences into that conversation. So I'm hitting him with questions. And he said, Brian, I got to stop you. And I'm like, yes. And he goes, I'm going to be honest with you. I went to the local university and I had a student put this food safety plan together for me because I wanted to sell in the US. I really don't know any of the stuff that you're asking me. Okay. Guess who was on a plane in 2 weeks to go evaluate that supplier? I was. And they didn't know what they were doing, to be honest. And you don't know that until you have those conversations. And as we talked about on past chats, Write this down, guys. Quality only has power in these conversations before the contract is signed, because you have money, right? They want to sell you something and they want your money. That's when you have the leverage. Back to our car example. You don't negotiate options and features for the car after you buy it, right? The salesman's going to laugh at you. He's like, oh yeah, sure. We can give you the whiz bang rust protection. It's going to be an extra $500. Oh no, I want that included. No, you've already bought the car.
Thanks for coming out. Thanks for coming
Too
out.
late.
Yeah. And I think, that's a good point, Ryan, that, when you're dealing, if you created a risk profile for your supply chain, which everybody should, and more importantly, go right down to the ingredient level, then, you may decide to go and visit some of those suppliers before you make a decision. And the old adage, if you can buy direct rather than through a broker, and even if you buy through a broker and they won't disclose who the supplier is, you got a problem.
Yeah, under foreign supplier verification, you have to know the manufacturing plant. Isn't that right, Allie? You have to know the manufacturing plant.
Right.
The manufacturer is not the broker. It's not the distributor. You have to know we are purchasing from this plant in China. This plant only. No other plants. You can't switch. If you do, you got to reevaluate it. Super important.
Yeah.
So as Sean is saying, well, unfortunately, quality is rarely involved up front. Yes, you need to become involved. And you need to teach them, right? You can't be sitting at the desk with the procurement guy all day long. Teach them these questions. And if the supplier can't meet some basic questions, pass. Move on to the next supplier.
Yeah, I think to add to what Sean's saying, Brian, you and I chatted with somebody in the industry several months ago who came from the automotive industry, and he made a comment that I thought was very, apropos here. He said that while he was in the automotive industry, there was not one senior management meeting that took place without quality being at the table as part of that decision process. So, that's something we're not doing in the food industry very well. Okay. But again, it's a lesson that we need to sort of, from a leadership perspective, we need to indoctrinate that kind of thinking. I will say one last thing that I wanted to mention, and that is, when you're doing your risk profiles and your ingredient sourcing, you need to understand that if you're in the food sector, that's one set of regulations. If you're in the liquor sector, that's another set of regulations. If you're, and when you're in the natural products or dietary supplement space, that's a whole other set of regulations. And they're not all, equal. All right. So some are more stringent than others. Some are much more lax. So, you need to take that into consideration in your risk profiles.
Yes. And something else to take into consideration. You're evaluating your supplier, Paul. Guess what? Your supplier is evaluating you too. And they're trying to figure out, okay, is this new customer going to be a pushover? Am I going to be able to send them substandard ingredients and they won't notice? Am I going to be able to be late on orders and they won't complain? How easy and is it going to be for me to get away with things? You're being evaluated, and suppliers know that.
So, a case in point, I did some work for a retailer for their own brand cinnamon products. They had a private label high-end cinnamon. They had a no-name low-end private label cinnamon, and they wanted to know if the product was adulterated in any way. Well, we did the analysis, sent it out to Purity IQ. They did the analysis on it, and they came back with good news and bad news. The good news is the product was not adulterated in any way, which they were happy about. But the bad news was they were the same product, and they were buying. They were paying a premium for the no-name product.
Right. That's cha-ching. Right. Yeah. That supplier's making money off of you because you don't know the difference. You didn't know what questions to ask. And we talked about this on a past chat with the CEO of Purity IQ, Delio. And we used the cinnamon example. At the end of the chat, I'll put in the link for the database. And then if you didn't watch that conversation with her, fascinating. You can learn more about that fingerprinting process. Because, I mean, I like the fingerprinting analogy because, it's unique, right? Once you figure that out, it's unique. And that helps a ton. So the starting point in this process is, okay, have a spec, know what you want, know who you're talking to. A big piece of this as well, Paul, is understanding, and Cortland can definitely chime in on this in the chat here as well, is, okay, fine, they give you a COA. Now let's talk about your testing. What is their testing? What is their supply chain? If you're buying cinnamon, who are you buying from? Where are you processing it at? How do you make sure that is pure? You need to understand their business. And when they send that COA, what does that mean? What methodologies are they using? How are they sampling? And this is always a big one, is suppliers, just like you, Paul, testing is expensive. And a lot of times, if you're not paying attention, it's like, we've been getting in all these shipments from this supplier and the COA testing results are exactly the same every single time. Why? Now you talk with the supplier and the supplier says, yeah, we only test once a year. And so then we use those same results over the year. But you've received 15 or 20 lots during that year. No bueno, that's bad. And they're doing that because it's expensive. And if you don't catch that, again, up front, before the contract, big mistake.
Yeah, to add to that, and Cortland will know this too, is that very often, you are also maybe dealing with a commercial lab that, is an accredited lab, 17025, and you're really feeling nice and fuzzy and warm about it all. But then, if you take a deeper dive into that COA, you may find that lab is actually not accredited in the scope of your product. Yes. So that's another thing to look out for, is making sure that, whatever you're testing for is within the accreditation scope for that lab. Okay, I think that's a very common problem. Just one last thing on what you said, Brian, and what we see and what we find is really, you can get a lot of information from those COAs. And I think, it behooves the lab industry to be able to take the time to explain either the lab or the supplier. Somebody's got to communicate and interpret some of that data for you. And I think that, you get the one page, there's your COA, thank you very much. But actually, if you take a deeper dive into it and get some interpretation on it, you might find it very enlightening.
Yes, exactly. And so, for example, the COA piece of it, going back to and using our non-fat dry milk example again. So I am producing infant formula for I don't know, a company called ByHeart, and I'm buying non-fat dry milk. Should, in retrospect, Clostridium botulinum testing, should that have been on the specifications? Yes, it should have. And they should have been, right? Hindsight's 2020. And that's part of the problem with what we're trying to do in our theme here for today, is you need to understand. So if I'm the infant formula manufacturer and I know that this is a risk for infants, because we know it from honey and other things, I need to be talking about all my suppliers where that's a potential risk. And they need to explain to me their processes that make sure that they don't have that, and how they're testing as a final step to make sure that it's not there. But again, finished product testing, very unreliable, right? If you think that you're going to find it, maybe you will, maybe you won't. The process is more important than the testing. You need to understand that.
So again, preventive approaches are, in order, and understanding what you want. What is your definition of quality? What is your definition of what is your specification? All those things up front, and then go to that supplier and talk to them. Don't just have procurement. There's 4 suppliers out there. Here's the cheapest one, or there's only one supplier, so I can only buy from them. Well, you got a problem if that's the case, and for some reason that supply is adulterated in some way.
Right. So you need to understand lot size. So let's say, for example, that there is the salmonella testing on the COA. Okay, great. Tell me about that. How do you sample? Well, we pull a 25-gram sample. Ooh, all right, well, that's not very much. How big is your lot? And if you're talking about dairy products, like dairy powders and things like this, you have lots with hundreds of thousands or millions of pounds. 25 grams, you're just testing to put a number on a piece of paper by doing that.
I'll give you an quick analogy here. I worked in the gluten-free space for a long time, and we have a regulation under 20 ppm in the final product is allowable in the product. But we've seen a big shift in the approach to random end product testing is what you're talking about, Brian.
Yes.
And so again, looking at preventive controls and saying, okay, if you start clean, it's easier to manage within the manufacturing process, and then you test on your way out just to validate your process. Okay, so again, it's all, but you can control what's in your four walls, but you cannot control what's coming in your back door very well, right, unless you are proactive.
Right. So really, we've been talking about the technical side of this in 17025 certification and SAM. These are all the basic blocking and tackling. Really kind of what we're talking about above this is the people side of things. And this is where, as we talk about here on the chat all the time, the technical skills are great, but you need to be thinking about this from a human perspective as well. So, do I know and trust this supplier? If they're not known, your guards go way up. If there are market conditions in the world that are going to be advantageous for a criminal, your guards go up. So for example, there was a huge issue a number of years ago. A lot of the vanilla in the world comes from Madagascar, and real vanilla is extremely expensive. A typhoon came through, whack, knocked out most of the crop. The price of vanilla skyrocketed. If I'm a criminal, I'm seeing that and going, ooh, money, 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 right? Because people are now scrambling for vanilla, and you need to keep the production lines going. And that procurement guy isn't going to be necessarily as careful as he normally is. He's just going, oh my God, I've got to find vanilla. Vanilla. They're scouring the world trying to find vanilla. And it's the visual I like to use on this is the guy in Times Square who's standing in an alley with a trench coat, and you walk by and he opens his coat and goes, hey, you want to buy a Rolex? Right? That's the same guy that you're buying the vanilla from. Your guards need to go up big time. Certain products have historical risk. Honey, right? Classic example. Olive oil from Italy, classic example, right? Are you really buying? Odds are if you're buying honey, it's not honey. If you're purchasing products, and you can't avoid this, if you're purchasing materials from China, if you're buying food chemicals, sodium citrate, it's coming from China. How do you know that is what you're buying? This gets back to what you're talking about, Paul, with fingerprinting, to make sure that you're getting what you get. And guess what? If that supplier knows you're going to be doing that testing, they're going to send you good stuff because they know they don't want to get caught. Price volatility, as we mentioned, is a huge one. Marketing origin. Guess what? Some countries are just riskier than others. China, India. We talked about with cinnamon, right? Is it coming from Sri Lanka or is it coming from Vietnam? If it's coming from Vietnam, it's probably the lower quality product. You need to be educated on these things. They're educated on the supply side. You need to be educated on the purchasing side. And as we've been talking about as a theme during this, you need to work very, very closely with your procurement group. This is your front line of defense. And as we talked about, Paul, if we're going to improve in food safety, we need to move beyond what we're doing now. What we're doing now is important, but we need to be building on this and looking at things proactively, right? I'm a broken record on this, proactive versus reactive. Once that ingredient's in your plant and you reject it, it's too late, right? The damage is done. And if you're the quality manager, you're going to get pressure. Oh, can't we just release this? It's not that bad. We need to manufacture. If we don't release this lot, Brian, we're going to shut down the production lines. Right? Pressure, pressure, pressure.
Yes.
Ugh.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the kicker in the whole thing, that the fraudsters are getting better at what they do. In other words, they're creating synthetics, they're creating products that can mimic, the pure and real product. So, it becomes tougher and tougher to identify where there is, substitution or, adulteration in these products. So, you need to take a deeper dive these days, especially if it's your own brand, and it always is. You're at somewhere in the supply chain, it's your brand. So you need to be protect that business. And again, it's unfortunate, we all have the food safety and quality has all the responsibility, and really, we can't seem to penetrate that leadership mind.
Right. Well, yeah, so exactly. So let's kind of switch here for the last 10 minutes to, okay, Paul, Brian, okay, got it. Understand, big freaking problem. I need to figure this out. What do I actually do? So Cortland here has a good suggestion. Thank you, sir. Suggest reading FDA's supply chain guide written by Marla Phillips. Thank you, sir. Hope everybody saw that comment. So part of this then is, okay, I need to put together a game plan. And to your point, Paul, don't do this in a bubble. This needs to be a company plan. This needs to be how you're going to be addressing fraud and quality and safety for the company. Because if you're just trying to do it in your quality bubble, you're going to fail, right? You're going to fail 100% guaranteed. This needs to be a company initiative. And you then need to look at your ingredients and recognize a fact of life. You can't test everything, right? And you would go bankrupt. You can't audit everybody. You can't test for everything. It's impossible. So you need to prioritize, and you need to look at risk. I mean, hell, that's what food safety is all about. Hazards reasonably likely to occur. What are they? If I'm buying honey, should I be looking at authenticity for honey? Hell yeah. Should I be looking for residual antibiotics in the honey because they treat the bees in certain parts of the world? Hell yeah, right? You need to figure these things out. Is it important to look for adulterants in salt? Probably not. Right? There's more important things that you need to be looking at. Why? To your point, Paul, criminals are not stupid. They're doing this to make money. They're going to go where the money is. Follow those trails. To your point earlier, why in the hell did melamine end up in the non-fat dry milk? It was a cheap chemical byproduct that mimicked protein in the tests, and they figured that out. And they went, yes, print some money. They had no idea it caused liver failure and caused all kinds of misery and grief and dead pets and all kinds of stuff. That wasn't their objective. It was quick buck. So you need to figure this stuff out. And you need to then put together a mechanism in your company for two different main buckets. You need to say, okay, fine, moving forward, how do I put a plan in place to keep bad stuff from getting in the first place? How do I work with procurement? How do I make sure that they understand these rules of the game? How do I get samples, which for me is always suspect, because a product sample from a potential supplier, is that really representative? Hell no. That's going to be the best of the best. That's going to be pulled from a bag that's sitting in the salesman's office that's been there all year. What is that program with that? How does that look to keep the bad players out of the company to begin with? That's a huge win. Next step is, okay, how do I evaluate the suppliers I already have? Who are the ones that I know? Who are the ones that I trust? Who are the ones that have been with the company for 15, 20 years, that have been supplying us good product? That I can, and this is a weird word for quality people, trust. Who are the people that I can trust? Those are lower risk. Okay, fine, move on. What are those other ones that you need to look at? R&D wants to launch a new product with a superfood, right? What is it? Where does it come from? Terraflower, right? That's the classic example. Nobody understood the food safety risk associated with that, but they wanted to get that to market. What are those different risks associated with that? So these proprietary ingredients, single source, limited information, you've got to buy from them. Well, you need to be testing those. Something I think people overlook too, Paul, is high volume ingredients. If you're buying a whole lot of milk And that's in all the products that you manufacture. You need to be looking at that. Because if something does happen, your risk is much, much higher. What are ingredients that are known to have risks? And doing that upfront work, to your point, Paul, of working with the suppliers and fingerprinting those products, and they know that you're doing that, it goes a long way.
Yeah. I think, you touched on the need to, talk to people in the organization. What we're really talking about is how do you change the mindset and from a risk perspective, and get people's attention at a more senior level, if that's the case. And I think if you're a larger company and you may have a person looking at risk in your business. So my goal is to find a champion in your organization, right, that can help you with this. And usually it's going to try to be somebody more in the senior level. But like I say, large companies may have a risk person, but if they don't, maybe you go and find somebody on the leadership team that you could have a coffee with and have a heart-to-heart conversation and see, if you can raise the benchmark that way, bring that to people.
Yes, that's critical, and I want to underline that, because that is so important, Paul. You have to have a champion. You have to have a sponsor. There has to be somebody who has the ear of the senior leadership team, who then is talking to the board of directors, because we see this all the time in food safety. And I verbalize it this way, Paul. Oh, we never had a problem before. We've been buying these ingredients forever. That's a very dangerous position to be in. You're playing Russian roulette. The company needs to understand. And again, something else we emphasize here a lot too, Paul, frame this in business terms.
Exactly.
Right? Don't frame this in Chicken Little, the sky is falling, we need $10 million to test for all these things. You're not going to get anywhere on that. You need to show wins. You need to show how you're protecting the brand, to your points earlier. Yeah. How is this helping us to improve market share? How is this helping us to make more money? So when that senior person comes to the quality group and says, we need you to protect quality, you then can go to them and say, this is one of the ways that we're going to do it.
It's all about that superior quality.
Yeah, exactly. And so Cortland's funny here, because I have an example on salt too. I use salt as an example of a low risk thing, but even salt's not low risk. Do they send you the right salt? And if you have an organic product, what is the flow agent in the salt, right? Because some things are okay, some aren't. What type of salt are you buying, right? You still need to, even on products with very low risk, there's still things you've got to worry about. Is it food grade? Is it non-food grade, right? You can't put road salt in your product because it's cheap, right? So yeah, you need to look at all these things. But my point still stands. You're not going to have the same level of scrutiny on the salt as you are on a proprietary, single-use, ready-to-eat ingredient that can potentially impact the food safety and fraud capabilities of your product. Because to your point, Paul, it all comes down to two things: adulteration and misbranding. It's always those two things. And also work this into marketing. How can you use this information to build consumer awareness of how you helped tell your story? This is not things to hide away. These are things to be proud of.
Exactly.
Why does organic exist? Organic exists because people view purity as higher quality. Now, there's arguments on whether that's true or not. It doesn't matter from the consumer standpoint. In the minds of the consumer, organic equals better. Why? Right? You need to understand that. Everything comes back to the consumer, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, don't be afraid to tell a consumer that how you authenticate your products. I think that's the message. How you take that due diligence deep dive to make sure, that what you say is actually, in the product.
Yeah. And this all comes back to you can't shortcut this. The piece of paper is only representative at COA of the relationship you have with that supplier. And part of this is, and this is very important for your key suppliers, and again, it goes back to proprietary ingredients, critically defining ingredients for your products, high volume products, and risk. How are you giving those suppliers feedback? It never really happens, and especially at the plant level. Products arriving without COAs, products arriving and it's damaged. It's being shipped on trucks LTL with other stuff that it shouldn't be shipped with. What is your feedback mechanism for getting back to that supplier to tell them how they're actually doing? Most companies don't do that. At White Wave, we had a fantastic program that we put together with our procurement group. So with quality and procurement, we would have quarterly meetings with our key suppliers. And then we would go over with those suppliers and we'd set up metrics, things that quality cared about, things that procurement cared about. And then we would score that supplier green, yellow, red. And we would let them know how they were doing. And that was extremely successful in getting things fixed. Why? Because the person at that meeting that they sent was the salesperson, not the technical guy at the plant. The sales guy would then go back to corporate and go, oh crap, White Wave's really mad at us. What, why? We've been shipping them stuff. Well, yeah, but we've been screwing up orders and we're missing COAs and they're really mad. They're threatening to cut us off as a supplier. Did things get fixed right away because the sales team understood the risk? Yeah, absolutely. Why? Money, right? They're potentially losing a major customer, and reaction on that was very fast, and it worked really, really well.
In the interest of time, I just wanted to reinforce the importance of what you said about creating the business case.
Yes.
And there are many benefits for the business. Based on what we've been talking about, and you just need to pull those out and quantify those as well in a way that the business understands it. And I think absolutely, if you can do that with a champion or a sponsor in your business, I think you stand a good chance of making change.
Absolutely. And so with 3 minutes left here, Paul, let's kind of bring it back to the 30,000 foot level. What would you like to leave people with today as an action plan?
I think that, the supplier relationship is absolutely critical. And you shouldn't have to be, I was talking to a company just recently where they're getting their COAs and they're testing every single product that comes into their facility. That shouldn't be doing. Shouldn't have to do that.
No.
Okay. So again, make sure that that relationship, that you're working with the plant, your FSVP is, you're following that guideline and that rule, and then making sure that your supplier understands what you want. I think that's the big key. Is if the supplier understands what you want and they can't deliver, you got to go somewhere else. And then if they can deliver, then you've got the assurances that they can deliver. So
exactly. And the importance of working with a good lab on it. So Portland owns the lab.
Yep.
Hit him with questions. Purity IQ, extremely responsive. Talk with them and get an understanding from your perspective. Using their technical expertise from a laboratory standpoint is very important. And with that, one of the things here, guys, is my chat database. Here's the link to that. I'm giving everybody access as we're closing out the chat here through March and early April. I'm giving everybody access to the food safety chat database forever for $10, right? Which is, lunch at McDonald's. And with that in there, you can look up. So we've referenced in here the conversation we had here on the chat with the CEO of Purity IQ, Dalio. Fantastic conversation. You can learn more about this fingerprinting method using nuclear magnetic resonance and other tests to find out what to look for in the product as far as the fingerprint versus trying to identify a needle in the haystack of all the things that shouldn't be in there, because you go broke trying to do that. So go out there, find that chat. You can search in the database and find it right away using the Excel file. You can sort by topic, you can sort by author, all kinds of cool stuff like that. So that works really well. Also, another housekeeping note, next week I have to travel. So unfortunately, no chat next week. So I'll put out a note on that. I'm really bummed about that. but couldn't be helped. Need to get out to a client and do some stuff with them. So no chat next week, but we will be back here the following week as well. So fantastic comments here, Paul. These were amazing comments. And thank you to you, Paul. I mean, you're a font of information. Thanks for coming on the chat.
Well, thanks for having me, Brian. And I hope everybody who attended today got something valuable out of this. But again, I take Brian up on his offer to reach out and chat with any of us. And we're happy to chat more about this.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, this is an important topic. So in the meantime, everybody go out, have a great weekend, enjoy yourself. And we'll do it all again next week and protect the public with food safety. So have a great one and we'll speak soon. Talk to everybody.
Thank you.